Hi everybody, Lemon Metha here, and thank you for once again joining me on my journey as I go through my favorites list on fanfiction.net. So in the last video, we just finished up 2010 and got I think one or two stories from 2011. So we're gonna keep this train rolling, going through. Again, for those of you that don't know, why are you watching part 75 of this series? But anyway, I've been reading fanfiction for over a decade, and my favorites list on fanfiction.net, which was the original site that I started reading it on, got a little bloated, and almost a year and a half ago, I decided to prune the list by rereading all my stories on the favorites list in order of publication date, and seeing if they still deserve to stay on my list or not. I've read a little over 500 so far, and just under half have stayed on. So now we're getting into 2011, and let's see these stories. Again, links for all these stories will be in the description down below, as well as a link to my fanfiction.net profile, a link to the playlist so you can see the whole journey if you want to from the start, and a link to a forum where I also post this in pure text format if you want to just see the text instead of watching a video. So anyway, let's dive into these stories, starting with Eva Bravo by Zentrodie. And this is an Evangelion fic crossed over with an anime called Girls Bravo, which is it's a anime that's kind of an isekai before the word isekai was a thing, where a guy goes to another world that basically has next to no men and ends up getting married to a couple, gets married to a couple girls, and it's basically a rom-com. This one, Shinji falls that role after he gets eaten by the, I believe it's the 12th angel, the one that absorbs him into an alternate, little pocket dimension. And then after he comes back with his new wives. It's labeled, the story is labeled as a parody, but it's not really. It's just a slightly more humorous take on Evangelion, with an out of context problem, which is Shinji's wives solving all of the issues with their super technology. The tone is actually pretty standard for an adventure story, or just a normal story, and doesn't really go into the full crack that I feel like the parody label should be applied to, or even just the over the top nature of certain stories, I can't think of any off the top of my head of TV shows or something, but there, when you say parody, a certain expectation is there, and this doesn't actually meet that. Humor, fine. It's basically a lot of jokes and meant to be about funny situations, but it's not over the top enough for, I would say, parody. It's no Airplane or anything like that, right? It's just simple jokes, more like just a sitcom kind of thing. But honestly, it doesn't even feel like a sitcom. It's just a slightly humorous long form story of Evangelion. It does wrap up the main plot of Eva pretty fast. So if you want a happy ending where the big bastard, where even Gendo is actually a good guy and nice, and you can give it a look, but it's nothing super memorable or interesting, so I won't be keeping it on my list. Number 2 is Kyon's Death by Killer 300. And this is a bit different from most of the stories I read, and most of the stories that have been on this list. It's I'd call it cerebral, but it's not. It's not just a meta existential thing. Though it does have a lot of deep ideas, but it's more just a much more introspective story, and it's just focused a lot on thoughts and puzzling out motivations as opposed to actions. There's little emotion to be found in this story because it's told through Nagato and filtered through Nagato's point of view, Yuki, and there is one little emotional breakdown at the end, because Kyon does die, and somebody's gonna be pissed off. If you know from Haruhi Suzumiya, you'd know who that is. But the story itself is very clinical, and it's interesting. Like the nature of the story, and the fact that honestly a lot of the ones that I've read don't really come from Nagato's point of view makes this more of a curiosity for me, and I was intrigued, but I wasn't so captivated as to that I would like keep coming back to this. I think it's good and an interesting mystery, just not to the super amazing level that I feel I would keep it on my list. I do think people should give it a look though if you're interested in Haruhi Suzumiya and want to see something from Nagato's point of view. But it's not going to stay on my list. Alright, number 3 is more Haruhi Suzumiya story with The inFamy of Kyon by LightningHunter. And there's not really much to say about this one. It's the game. It's basically a retelling of the game Infamous, if you remember that old PS3 game from like 10 years ago now. I really enjoyed that game. I liked it a lot. But it's basically the first Infamous game with the main cast of characters swapped out for the SOS Brigade, with Kyon being replacing Cole as the main character and getting the lightning powers. And it's unfinished, super unfinished, pretty short, doesn't really get very far. And because the interesting drama and battles are not shown, there's a lot of neat setup stuff, like the time travelers, espers, and aliens all wanting the ray sphere, which is the main MacGuffin of the game, and each of the members getting power of the team getting power-ups, or the anti-SOS Brigade showing up and getting buffs as well and turning into a new faction, which would be a fourth enemy faction of the game. But again, because the story doesn't go anywhere, we don't see anything pay off aside from like one small fight with the anti-SOS Brigade. And hell, like the last chapter starts setting up this at least starts setting up a bit of an encounter with the first gang leader from the game, which also seems to be more interesting because it's here in this case it seems more like the gang leader actually knows our hero a lot more than it did in the game, and it's like, okay, that might have been an interesting given forward, since it seems like she knows a bit more. But sadly, since this is incomplete, it's just a collection of cool ideas that we're never going to see come to fruition, which becomes extremely frustrating, and it's not going to stay on my list. Next is to dive into one of the two most popular fandoms on the site, and one of the two that I read the most. More Harry Potter stuff. This one, The Boy Who Never Knew by Dunu Elos. And this story basically outlines the events of Harry's first year, with like recapping it after his year ended. But the conceit, the one change is that, nobody helped Harry get to Hogwarts, and like that one change leads to a huge bunch of ripple effects and stuff that leads to a final thing where it's just like Harry just didn't know who he was in relation to the wizarding world. We don't get a lot of insight into the characters' thoughts of the events as they're occurring. It's more of a flashback, and we see implications and the fallout that would occur at the end of the year. But yeah, this is very much like basically a For Want of a Nail fic that is pretty consolidated in its own. I think it's really, really interesting to see how much, whenever authors try to do this, where like one small change can have such huge consequences. And it's always interesting to see what, especially with good authors, how they decide to let the rocks fall. It only covers the first year. Would I've liked to see more? Sure. And the author has stated at the end that like you can use this story to jump off and spin off and create more. But I really liked it as it is. And it's a great take of how a quieter and shy and withdrawn Harry Potter's first year could have gone if he didn't have people forcing him to come out of his shell. And it's going to stay on my list. Alright, next story here is My Little Time Lord by Victorian R. Helsley. And this is Doctor Who Pony Edition. Takes place... I'm not sure exactly when. It takes place... I'm not sure exactly when it starts taking place, but it's... the story itself is pretty interesting. Derpy, or Ditzy Do, like, Derpy's our main protagonist, and, you know, the Doctor is Pony for a bit, but she's our main companion that we're following. And it's interesting in that it's like the show, you know, it's multiple adventures. This one has 2 adventures finished and the start of a third one, but it doesn't really... they're not the best. It's the second one is pretty interesting. It's like a, you know, it's a future jump and seeing a bunch of stuff. Derpy is a fun character, and, you know, we're mainly seeing her. She's fun when she's utilized well, but here she's basically just turned into a Doctor Who reference machine, because she's apparently just, like, seen a bunch of... I guess she's, like, looked into the time vortex or something, and so she just knows all the Doctor's past stuff and just keeps referencing stuff like that. And it's fine, but it's just... it gets tedious when it's just, like, one reference after another with that, like, things that are just not connected to what's actually happening in the first place. It becomes a little hard to follow, and it feels like the author didn't really have any ideas past the first 2 adventures, as the third adventure that starts but doesn't is basically a repeat of one of the episodes with Rose and the Ninth Doctor, where she saves her father's life. Like, in the end, like, I did like the idea. Like, I like Doctor Who as a bit, and the second adventure I actually thought was really good. There isn't really much else that will stay in my mind, and this story is not going to stay on my list. Next is The Apology by Durandal, another Haruhi Suzumiya fic. Durandal is, again, author I love very much. Sadly, he took his own life years ago, and the majority of his story, you know, his work is... But his work, I've loved basically everything that he wrote. And this is a one-shot that he wrote that takes place after the filming of the movie for the SOS Brigade, and which is basically it's a one-shot of Surya apologizing for her part in getting Mikuru drunk. It's pretty straightforward, doesn't involve any supernatural stuff, and that stuff, keeping it, like, simple and contained, makes it more heartfelt. Like, this is very much Surya, like, trying to reconcile with Kyon after what she now realizes is a big mistake, according to him. I think it's a really good scene that would fit in a larger story very, very well, but the problem is it was released as a one-shot. So, like I said, I think it's a good scene. Just, it doesn't stand by itself. It very much feels like the part of a bigger whole that's just not there. I could slot it into a dozen of his other stories, or, you know, some other Haruhi fics, and it would work. It would be a great addition, but as it stands by itself, it's something that I'd look at once and I wouldn't need to see again. So it's not going to stay on my list. Right, we got 2 more. First, we got From Square One by Miss Lam, a Naruto fic that takes place during the Chunin exams, but instead of Naruto getting the written Chunin exam, he gets a written exam for the Jonin exam, which turns out to be about the menu of Ichiraku ramen and why it's so important, so he passes with flying colors. The story, and then like he continues on to different phases of the Jonin exam while also getting somebody else to fill in for his slot in the Chunin exam. But the story itself doesn't actually get very far. It doesn't even finish with the first set of the exams. Like, it doesn't even get to the preliminaries of the Chunin exams. Nevertheless, whatever he was planning to do for the Jonin exams. And so we don't really get a lot. What's left is just a small collection of scenes where Naruto basically flails around and ends up using his stupidity to his advantage, and his naive charm to pass step by step of the Jonin exam, and a fun bit of his replacement and their interactions with Team 7. It's fine, I got a bunch of laughs out of it, but it's nothing really spectacular. The humor style really leans on like Naruto's stupidity and a couple exaggerations of characters like Anko and Rock Lee. But at the same time, aside from like the initial premise, I can't really remember any of the big jokes. I'd say it's fun. You give it a look, get a quick laugh, and then forget about it within a week, and it's not gonna stay on my list. Alright, and the last thing we have for this video is Digging My Potato by Digifruit, which is a Harry Potter one-shot that is basically a delve into Hermione's mindset and psyche. I liked it a lot. It's very simple. The premise is simple, and it's more just character introspection piece. There isn't any big action. It's just basically one task that's happening that involves a lot of flashbacks to how Hermione became the girl that she is today and why she's so driven. It's just a simple, nice character piece that if you like Hermione as a character, you'll enjoy a lot, and it's going to stay on my list. And there we have it for this video. Thank you all for watching. If you like this video, please leave a like, or if you want to be notified when I update these, please subscribe and ring the bell. I try to do this at least once a week. Again, links to my profile, these stories, playlist, all that stuff is in the description below. Please give it a look. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.